The night had come like a shroud, and the old manor on the outskirts of Blackwood was no longer just an abandoned relic. It was a place where whispered legends took on a sinister truth. Adrian Blackwell, a reclusive writer known for his chilling tales, had arrived with a singular purpose: to unravel the mystery that had haunted his family for generations. His ancestors, it was said, had been custodians of a terrible secret, one bound up in blood and sacrifice. Now, with a battered journal in hand and the weight of ancestral guilt on his shoulders, Adrian stepped into the manor's dark threshold. Inside, every creak of the wooden floor and every sigh of wind through broken windows set his heart pounding. Faded portraits lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow his every movement as if they carried memories of dread. Adrian's footsteps echoed in a corridor lined with dust and decay. In one room, remnants of an old family gathering, a cracked silver candelabra, tattered drapes, and a grand piano draped in cobwebs, spoke of a past both glamorous and tormented. As midnight neared, the manor appeared to awaken. A cold draft whispered through the hallways, and an inexplicable sense of foreboding tightened around him. In the dim light of his lantern, Adrian found a curious door partially hidden behind an antique bookshelf. Its heavy oak frame bore intricate carvings of cryptic symbols, and a single inscription read, "Sacrifice begets salvation." With trembling fingers, he pushed the door open and discovered a narrow spiral staircase descending into darkness. Every step downward echoed with his uncertain heartbeat. At the bottom, he entered a cavernous chamber where the walls were stained with what might have been old blood. In the center, a stone altar stood, adorned with relics that defied explanation: dried petals of crimson roses, a rusted dagger encrusted with age, and a dusty leather-bound grimoire whose pages whispered secrets of ancient rites. Adrian's mind raced with possibilities. Was this a shrine of vengeance? A memorial to a tragic event? Or was it something far more sinister, an altar where sacrifices were once offered to appease a restless force? A sudden clatter from behind startled him. In the dim glow of his lantern, a shadow moved silently along the far wall. "Who's there?" he called, voice cracking under the weight of dread. The silence that followed was as oppressive as the darkness itself. Yet in that oppressive silence, he sensed that he was not alone. The manor, it seemed, had awakened not just in stone and dust, but with an insatiable hunger for retribution. As the night deepened, Adrian felt that his very soul was being tested. The secrets of his bloodline lay hidden in the manor's bowels, and the answers might require more than mere research. They demanded a confrontation with the unspeakable forces of the past. With a resolve born of desperation and a heart steeled by fear, he decided to linger. In the flickering light of his lantern, every crevice of the chamber seemed to whisper his name, as if inviting him to become part of the manor's endless cycle of sacrifice and suffering. He opened the ancient grimoire and began to read aloud words that resonated through the hollow chamber. The language was archaic, the incantation rhythmic and deliberate. As he uttered the final syllable, the temperature plummeted. Shadows coalesced, and the once silent chamber began to pulse with an eerie, otherworldly life. In that moment, Adrian realized that the manor was not simply haunted by memories. It was alive with a dark, malevolent spirit that demanded retribution. The price, he feared, might be his very soul. In the days that followed his fateful discovery, Adrian became a prisoner within the manor's cursed walls. Every hour, the ancient structure revealed new horrors. The journal he carried, filled with scribbled family secrets and ominous warnings, had hinted at a prophecy. When the heir of the Blackwell line sought the truth, the house would awaken to reclaim its legacy. Now, confronted by the undeniable reality of those words, Adrian's determination to learn more turned to desperation. By daylight, the manor transformed. The once oppressive gloom was replaced by an unsettling quiet that pressed in on him like an accusation. Every room offered twisted relics of a bygone era: a portrait of a solemn woman whose eyes hinted at unspeakable grief, scattered papers chronicling forbidden rites, and faded diaries that recounted long-forgotten sacrifices made in desperate times. The more he uncovered, the more he sensed that the manor itself was a living archive of horrors, a museum of pain, regret, and sacrifice. On the second evening, as storm clouds gathered and lightning split the sky, Adrian found himself drawn to the manor's eastern wing, a section sealed off for decades. His heart hammered as he pried open a door with trembling hands. Inside lay a labyrinth of narrow corridors, each lined with cryptic symbols etched into the walls. At intervals, small niches housed macabre displays, dusty bones arranged in ritualistic patterns, rusted chains hanging like skeletal fingers, and faded offerings left by those who once believed in appeasing an ancient deity. Within one chamber, illuminated by sporadic flashes of lightning, Adrian discovered a series of murals. They depicted a cycle of events: a luminous figure descending from the heavens, the congregation of a secretive cult, and ultimately, a sacrifice that would seal the fate of an entire bloodline. The final panel was the most disturbing, a depiction of a lone figure, eyes wide with terror, offering his heart on an altar. Adrian's blood ran cold. The similarities to his own recent encounter were impossible to ignore. Each step further into the wing increased the intensity of the paranormal presence. Whispers echoed in dead languages, and disembodied voices seemed to murmur his name. He began to document everything in his journal, hoping that if he could unravel the mystery, he might find a way to end the curse that threatened not only him but the legacy of his ancestors. But as the hours bled into one another, the line between reality and nightmare blurred. Shadows lengthened in unnatural ways, and figures emerged from the corners of his vision, silent, mournful, and desperate. Late one night, as rain hammered the stained-glass windows, Adrian encountered a figure in the corridor. Dressed in antique garments that reeked of decay and sorrow, the apparition moved with an eerie grace. "You seek answers," the ghostly voice intoned, echoing as if from a great distance. "But every truth comes at a cost." Adrian's instinct urged him to flee, yet he was transfixed by the figure's sorrowful eyes. It extended a trembling hand and offered a faded photograph of a young man bearing an uncanny resemblance to Adrian himself. His eyes filled with a haunting mix of hope and despair. Beneath the photograph was a date and a single word: sacrifice. Haunted by that encounter, Adrian spent sleepless nights poring over the diaries and records he found scattered in the eastern wing. They recounted rituals performed to ward off an ancient evil, a malevolent force that fed on the pain and sacrifice of generations. One entry, written in a shaky hand, described a ritual that could restore balance by offering that which is most precious. The implication was clear. A sacrifice of the heart, of one's very life or soul, was demanded to quell the restless spirit of the manor. The revelation tore at Adrian's resolve. Had his arrival been predetermined? Was he fated to be the next victim, and the final sacrifice? Every echo in the hall, every shifting shadow, seemed to whisper that destiny was inexorably linked to the manor's cursed past. In that labyrinth of decay and despair, the writer began to feel less like an investigator and more like a pawn in a game orchestrated by forces beyond mortal ken. Yet even as terror gnawed at him, a spark of determination burned within Adrian. He vowed that if his fate was to be sealed by ancient rites, then he would confront the darkness head-on. He would seek out the altar once more, decode the inscriptions, and perhaps find a way to rewrite the tragic legacy. The truth, he realized, lay not only in the relics of the past but in the sacrifices that had been made, and those yet to come. The turning point came on a night when the boundary between the living and the dead had all but vanished. Thunder rolled as if echoing the tormented cries of lost souls, and torrential rain lashed the manor's time-worn walls. Adrian, now more a man possessed than a mere investigator, resolved to perform the ritual described in the diaries. He believed that by confronting the darkness directly, he might end the cycle of sacrifice, and perhaps even free his family from its ancient curse. Armed with the grimoire and the cryptic knowledge gleaned from the murals, Adrian returned to the hidden chamber beneath the manor. The altar stood as before, a silent sentinel surrounded by relics of forgotten torment. This time, however, the atmosphere was charged with palpable malice. The very air seemed to vibrate with an ominous energy, and the stone floor was slick with moisture that resembled congealed blood. Adrian began the incantation in a trembling yet resolute voice, his words merging with the rumble of the storm. As he recited the archaic phrases, the room darkened further. A deep hum resonated from the walls, and spectral forms began to materialize. These apparitions, victims of past sacrifices, circled the altar in a silent lament. Their faces were contorted in agony and longing, a visual testimony to the terrible cost of appeasing the ancient evil. In the midst of the rising chaos, a revelation struck him. The ritual required a sacrifice not of an object, but of a person. And as the apparitions converged, their hollow eyes fixed on him, Adrian understood with a chilling clarity that the debt of his bloodline demanded satisfaction. The very lineage he had hoped to redeem now called upon him to be the final offering. For a moment, terror threatened to overwhelm him. Memories of happier times, his mother's gentle smile, his father's warm embrace, flickered in his mind like fading embers. Yet, amid that heartache, a fierce determination surged. If his own sacrifice could break the cycle and save future generations from a fate as gruesome as the past, then it was a burden he would bear willingly. With a trembling hand, he clutched the rusted dagger and approached the altar. The apparition's whispers swelled into a mournful chorus that filled the chamber, their voices mingling with the tempest outside. Adrian's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he carved a symbolic mark, a sigil passed down through generations, onto his own skin. The pain was excruciating, yet it felt like an act of purification, a bridge between the living and the dead. As the ritual reached its crescendo, the manor itself seemed to shudder. The spectral forms raised their hands in an unspoken benediction, and a brilliant, otherworldly light enveloped the chamber. Adrian staggered back, his vision blurring as the ancient force stirred. In that surreal moment, the boundaries of time and fate dissolved. He saw flashes of the manor's tragic past, the sacrifices made in despair, the silent suffering of his ancestors, and the endless cycle of retribution that had bound them all. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the ritual was complete. The apparitions began to fade, their voices subsiding into a soft murmur, leaving behind a stillness that was both eerie and oddly serene. Adrian fell to his knees before the altar, the dagger clattering to the stone floor. In the quiet aftermath, he felt the heavy hand of destiny lift from his shoulders, replaced by a fragile hope that the curse might finally be broken. Yet, even as relief mingled with sorrow, the manor whispered one final secret. The sacrifice was not the end, but the beginning of a new covenant. Adrian's offering had appeased the ancient evil for now, but the truth was that every act of sacrifice carried within it the seeds of both redemption and sorrow. The cost of breaking the cycle had been steep, a price paid in blood and heartbreak, one that would echo through the ages. In that grim, silent chamber, amid the ruins of ancestral pain, Adrian realized that life was a series of choices, some born of necessity, others of destiny. His sacrifice had been both an end and a beginning, a somber reminder that to heal the wounds of the past, one must sometimes offer up the very essence of oneself. In the days that followed, the manor seemed to exhale a long-held breath. The oppressive gloom lifted ever so slightly, and a quiet peace settled over the decaying halls. Adrian, forever changed by his ordeal, emerged from the manor a living testament to the burden and beauty of sacrifice. His journal, now filled with the stark truths of his ancestors' legacy, would serve as a warning and a guide to future generations. The experience taught him that the path to redemption is paved with difficult choices and that sometimes one must surrender a piece of oneself to break free of an ancient curse. The moral was clear. True salvation often demands the courage to face our darkest fears and to offer our hearts willingly in the name of hope. If you found this tale as chilling and thought-provoking as I intended, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Your support keeps the stories and the legends alive. Thank you for reading The Haunting Sacrifice. May its echoes remind us that even in the darkest nights, the light of redemption can be kindled by a single, selfless act.